Last time we left the Gneisenau still in the port of Brest and set up Operation Cerberus, otherwise known as the Channel Dash, of which the battleships Scharnhorst and Gneisenau, the heavy cruiser Prinz Eugen, along with escorts would go through the English Channel in an effort to make it back to Germany so that they could eventually be stationed in Norway, as Hitler feared an Allied invasion of Norway and wanted his surface units to be stationed there to repel any Allied attempt to invade the occupied nation. On the 11th of February at noon, Vice Admiral Ciliax had a meeting with the senior officers of his fleet aboard the Scharnhorst, with the captains of the Scharnhorst, Gneisenau, and Prinz Eugen being in attendance. With weather and tides being favorable, escort ships in place, fighter cover assembled, and minefields cleared, Ciliax announced that at 7:30 they would depart under the guise of a night exercise, as the crews had not been told that they would take the battle fleet through the English Channel to return home to Germany. But the movements of the Germans were being observed by a British submarine, HMS Sea Lion, where her skipper, Commander Colvin, would keep her on station for a time, observing various small craft leaving and entering the port. But at 2 p.m. he would leave and go about 30 miles out to surface and charge batteries. With that, the first line of sight for the British was away from Brest now. Another line of detection was the Hudson aircraft, but due to an engagement with the Ju-88, the ASV radar set was not working, and with visibility near zero outside, and the sea being almost invisible, they couldn't really see what was going on. But as the Hudson was pulling away from Brest at 7:30, the ships under Ciliax's battle fleet were getting underway to begin their journey home. But as they were doing that, air raid sirens began to go off, and the sound of anti-aircraft fire could be heard, as a nighttime raid by Wellington bombers was commencing. With Ciliax ordering to halt sailing procedures and to sit in the artificially developed smokescreen, eventually, after enduring the raid for 90 minutes, the all-clear signal was given and the order was given to cast off, not being until 9:30 when the breakout had truly begun. The British would continue to have bad luck with their reconnaissance sweeps of the northern coast of France, with radar sets and several more aircraft not working properly, and with poor visibility, the German ships would continue to go undetected. By around midnight, Ciliax's ships were off the island of Ushant, cruising at 27 knots, and were making up the lost time during the air raid on Brest. They rounded Breton Island and altered course to starboard to enter the English Channel. At 1:25 in the morning, the ships maneuvered northeast, making a line that would bring them just north of the German-occupied Channel Islands. This was going to be the first crucial point of the journey, as to quote from Run the Gauntlet, The Channel Dash, 1942, by Ken Ford, quote, "The point of no return. Once in the Channel, there was no going back. The secret was now out. All on board the great warships were told their destination was Germany. They were going home." End quote. By 7:45 a.m., the first light of dawn could be seen and action stations were called aboard the German ships, with the first daytime combat air patrol from Adolf Galland's fighters arriving at 7:50, dropping flares to announce their arrival. And just to make sure to announce their presence, they would fly down near the ships to dip their wings and salute and then headed back up to operational altitude. Following this, Ciliax was notified of mines that the British had placed during the night, and they might come across them in the path that they're continuing on. Minesweepers were already hard at work trying to clear the mines, but they might not be cleared before the German ships reached the area. Ciliax considered a course around the minefield, but he determined that it could be fatal for the ships to make a detour around the mines, which would be hazardous and time-consuming, so he decided to continue on his current course across the minefield, although at a reduced speed, and by 8:30 the German ships were through this trial by minefield and had resumed a 27-knot speed. Meanwhile, at 8:45, two Spitfires would take off, one heading southwest and another heading on a more northerly course, with neither seeing much besides a few fishing boats, until one would spot E-boats leaving Boulogne, heading towards Dieppe. The pilot who had seen the E-boats had in fact seen the escorts for the German ships currently making their way through the channel, when they would need additional escorts near the Dover Straits. And if they just continued a little bit more west, they probably would have seen the German fleet making its way up the channel. Another missed opportunity. But due to radar reports from Corporal Jones at the Range and Direction Finding Station at Beachy Head, two Spitfires of the 91st Squadron from Hawkinge Airfield would be in the air by 10:20 in the morning. Although visibility was poor, they would spot 7 miles off Boulogne 2 lines of E-boats, being 9 ships in total, and then 3 miles ahead of them they would spot around 25 ships, several of them being larger vessels. They would attempt to go in to get a better look, but they were deterred by 2 Me-109s, returning to their airbase by 10:50 to report what they had seen, describing it as a large German naval convoy, as they were not looking for a large German battle fleet since no one from high command had told them that they would be expecting one at some point. Nevertheless, the information would spread, but the Admiralty would not be sufficiently convinced that this was in fact the German battle fleet that they had been expecting. For all they knew, the German heavy ships were still in Brest. At the same time, another Spitfire flight was going on, being flown by Group Captain Victor Beamish and Wing Commander Boyd from Kenley Aerodrome. Beamish was pretty much desk-bound and needed some way to get back into the air to not be too rusty if he needed to fly. Anyway, they would perform a normal sweep of the channel south of Boulogne. They would encounter Messerschmitts, and then they would spot the German fleet, being about 5 miles off the French coast near Les Touquet. The two would have to not only dodge the German planes, but a barrage of German anti-aircraft fire, still managing to get some cannon shots off against the E-boats, eventually getting away from the German aircraft, who declined to follow as they are needed to provide combat air patrol for the warships. But for Vice Admiral Ciliax aboard the Scharnhorst, the cat was out of the bag, and they had been spotted, and that meant the main battle would begin shortly. The two Spitfires would head for Kenley Airfield in complete radio silence, intending to give their report in person. Beamish and Boyd would land at 11:09 a.m. and head to the nearest telephone to give their report. Due to the ban on radio transmissions, the German fleet would make it another 17 miles up the channel since their original sighting at 10:40. Nevertheless, with the word of a senior officer identifying the ships in the channel as the heavy units from Brest, all along the south coast of England, the warning was sent out that the German ships are in the channel. Vice Admiral Ramsay, stationed at Dover, would have the immediate means of doing any substantial damage to the German ships by torpedo, the first being the motor torpedo boat stationed at Dover and Ramsgate, while the second was the ferry Swordfish biplane stationed at Manston. Neither particularly suited for attacking such a powerful force, but with nothing else to throw at the Germans at the time, Ramsay would give the orders for both types of attack to be made. Although torpedoes were the best means of attacking the German ships, there were still other means of doing so, with the coastal artillery emplacements. At Dover, there were 6-inch guns with a range of 20,000 yards, but they wouldn't have the range to hit the Germans. There were larger guns like the 15-inch battery at Wanston, but they had a slow rate of fire and a very limited traverse, and would be nearly impossible to use against moving ships, especially with the Germans going at high speed. The most capable guns would be the battery of 4 9.2-inch guns found at South Foreland. It should be noted that at 11:30, the Scharnhorst and Gneisenau were properly identified, and the coastal guns were duly notified. At 12:15, the battery's radar would pick up the German ships, and minutes earlier, they had been given the ship's course and bearing, but the bearing from the radar set was erratic due to so many targets in a small location. Even with bearings uncertain, at 12:19, the guns at South Foreland roared to life, with a salvo from 2 of their guns, with one of the 2 misfiring. The shot was about a mile off to port the nearest German ship. With this attack, the German E-boats were given orders to make smoke to obscure their position. The coastal battery would fire several more salvos, but they too would fall far astern of any passing German ships. At 12:35, the German coastal battery at Cap Gris-Nez began to open up with counterfire against the British positions. This effectively neutralized the guns at South Foreland, because by then the German fleet was well out of range of the guns. The British would fire 33 rounds, and the Germans would remain unharmed. With this, Ciliax couldn't believe his luck. His ships just made it through the Dover Strait, being the first commander in 300 years to lead a hostile fleet through the entire length of the English Channel unscathed. Quite the feat, but he knew that it was not all the British had to throw at him. The first attack that would come would be the attack of the motor torpedo boats. Due to the timing of the spotting, and by the time the motor torpedo boats got underway, the German ships had passed over already, and the MTBs would have to catch up to the German ships and attack from the rear. Now, because I didn't want to throw too much information at you, I have yet to discuss the British plan for the breakout of German units from Brest, it being called Operation Fowler. For the MTBs, they would have already been at sea in the cover of darkness waiting for the German ships, and to go at them from the front at maximum speed. Now they had to find a way to catch up and make their way through the screen of E-boats. But at 12:23, Lieutenant Commander Pumphrey, who was leading the MTBs, would record spotting the German ships. He would try to find a way to get ahead of the E-boat screen, pushing his boat to maximum speed. But one of his engines would falter and his speed would drop. But he was able to turn to starboard and loose 2 torpedoes at what he thought was the Scharnhorst. The other boats of his group would find their speed not great enough to overtake the E-boats, so their attack would have to go through the enemy screen. As they closed in to attack the German ships, they came under heavy fire from the German ships and the fighters above, finding it difficult to both dodge the German attacks and lining up their own. But MTBs 48 and 219 would fire their torpedoes through the E-boat screen between 12:31 and 12:35 from a distance of 4,500 yards. MTB 45 near the end of the enemy fleet would attract the attention of a German destroyer, acting as rearguard to the fleet. It would pull out of line to attack the torpedo boat. Through making smoke cover, MTB 45 would join the other ships, making a hasty escape. But as the MTBs were making their escape, Motor gunboats from Dover were making their appearance, with MGB 41 and 43 slipping between the destroyers and MTBs to engage the German ships and make smoke to cover the escape. Another MTB who was delayed due to an engine malfunction made an appearance, making a torpedo run against the German ships, not hitting anything, but they would make a false report of hitting the Prince Eugen with a torpedo. The Ramsgate MTBs would try to make a run as well, but the three boats did not encounter the German fleet, crossing astern of the German ships. While this was going on, another attack was beginning as well. The ferry Swordfish of the Fleet Air Arm were beginning their attacks on the German ships as well. The fire that was focused on the MTBs would also open up against the torpedo bombers. The MTBs who were still in the area would swing northeast to be ready to pick up any survivors from any Swordfish that was shot down. Now, unfortunately, due to several factors that I don't feel particularly comfortable getting into on the channel, we'll have to cover the further events of the Channel Dash in another part. I know I'm really milking the series, but ever since my first video on the Gneisenau, I wanted to make sure I did things right. So with that, I'll leave you until next time, my friends. Good luck this week.